How has this played out on the campuses? We've watched this, and you and I know the answer to that, but I want you to explain it as an Iranian American that has looked at this, because you said it's been disgusting what you've seen these American students do. Talk about that for our listeners, about what you're seeing and how it looks to you.
I mean, we can get into the way that the organizers are behind much of this and influencing and who they've been paid by and all of that. But just at a broader level, the things that we are seeing play directly into the regime's propaganda. When you hear these students chanting things like Hamas, Hamas, we love you, we support your rockets too, or burn Tel Aviv to the ground, all of these things are Islamic Republic propaganda. And what that comes from is teaching these students to believe that there is this false binary of oppressed and oppressor. And the ultimate evil is white supremacy, and everything that's not white supremacy is good. So the oppressed, being Hamas, which is what they tell them, right? The Hamas are the oppressed. They can do no wrong. They're freedom fighters. There are no red lines to what Hamas can do because they're oppressed people. Now, obviously, we know that this is not true. We know that Hamas leaders are billionaires. We know that what Hamas is working towards is not the freedom of the Palestinian people in occupied territories, but it is to destroy Israel, which is exactly what the Islamic Republic has publicly said is their goal, and exactly why they fund and train Hamas, for the purpose of annihilating Israel. However, the Islamic Republic's propaganda convinces these people that it has nothing to do with that these are oppressed freedom fighters who are fighting for the liberation of Palestinians in occupied territories, which is simply not true. And that is how you convince the Western left, who buy into this binary, that Hamas are just oppressed people that can do no wrong. That leads to them on these campuses chanting these, just unbelievable things and engaging in acts of very, very disturbing anti-Semitism, right? This is all rooted in this indoctrination that has been working up for the past several decades in the US.
But how is this happening? Let's think about this for a minute. We're talking about America. We're talking about elite universities where we supposedly have students that are intelligent. We supposedly have universities where we're teaching critical thinking. We are teaching geopolitical realities. We're teaching history. And we have clear evidence that there has been an invasion where they come across, and I was just there last week. I was in the kibbutz, a couple of them. I was at the Nova Festival site. I've seen the blood-splattered walls. I've seen the cribs. I've actually stood in the rooms where the bullet holes are in the doors of the safe rooms. I've seen these things with my own eyes. I've talked to the people that survived. I've talked to the families that were held hostage for 52 days and then released, but still have family members there. These were not military targets. These were soft target non-combatants. They came across the border and assassinated them, murdered them, beheaded them, cut off arms, legs, raped them, tortured them. And we have students that are celebrating these people for two reasons. One, because it was Jews that it was done to, which apparently makes it okay in their eyes. And two, because they believe that it's, quote, resistance. I can't even.
Yeah.
And look, I've studied brainwashing. I've studied psychological warfare. I don't even know how I would start selling that, and it has been bought lock, stock, and barrel. How is that possible?
Well, this process of indoctrination, which begins with dehumanizing Jews, okay, but they don't do it in that way that's so obvious to talk about Jews and call them Jews. And this is a pattern that we've seen every time that there was a mass kind of genocide or something like this. during the Holocaust or during slavery. It starts by the dehumanization of these are white supremacists, these are colonizers. You don't ever say Jews explicitly. You say these are Zionists, right? You find different terms. This is exactly what they did during the Holocaust. These are capitalists, these are communists. You never explicitly say Jews. Once you've laid the groundwork that this thing is the most evil thing in the world, right? Being a colonizer or a white supremacist or Zionist or whatever the word is, then you get consent from that person, right, to kill whoever it is that you've dehumanized. So once you've built that foundation, but these are colonizers, these are this, these are that, then it seems perfectly okay to slaughter whoever fits in with that, it fits into that bracket because of the priming process that has just taken place. So that priming process, again, it's all Islamic Republic propaganda, and that's what people need to understand where this comes from. And then, yes, it comes to the US. And no, absolutely, they do not teach critical thinking in these schools. That is the last thing that they teach in these schools, because the professors of these schools are the people that went to these schools and were taught the same ideologies of, you know, anti-imperialism and anti-Westernism, and this is all colonization and white supremacy. None of this comports with the actual facts of the history of the Levant. It's completely disingenuous. It's completely wrong. And so these students are being taught by the same people who are students of the same ideologies, all of the propaganda which comes from the Islamic Republic that has been priming for decades the dehumanization of Jews as colonizers. And this is exactly why people have no problem celebrating their murder or just denying that it didn't happen at all.
You know, it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to get hundreds and hundreds of students on a campus to go out and live in tents and support something like this when a few months ago, they didn't even have the word Hamas in their vocabulary.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that they're living in tents because something that I've also been talking about is the way that the radical left have fetishized oppression as a byproduct of this oppressor-oppressed binary, which I've been talking to you about, right? So the oppressors are the all evil white supremacists in the world, and the oppressed are people of color. Now it's this iteration, it's Middle Eastern Muslim people, right? The country places that I'm from. They fetishize that. Being oppressed is now glamorous. Everybody wants to be oppressed. So what we're actually seeing is a lot of these people are remaking or reliving the situation of oppression that they're seeing in Gaza. Why are they intense? When in ever of all time have you seen protests where people are in these tents that literally look like the same tents as Rafah? Why is it that these students are telling the cameras, we're asking for basic humanitarian aid? A term that's just used for when situations of war and famine. That isn't a term that you use for people that are hungry. It's this glamorization of oppression where they're actually trying to recreate being oppressed because they've been taught to fetishize it so much.
That's interesting that we've got these Ivy League students that are standing out there in these designer clothes on the steps of the library, and they're identifying themselves with Gazans who are living on 245 calories a day because Hamas is stealing whatever aid is coming in.
Yep.
But yet they're relating to them, they're identifying themselves as those people. That doesn't seem to fit in your ear very well.
Well, you know, and that's exactly what they're trying to do, is they're trying to shirk their privilege because they've been taught, you know, this society kind of operates in pendulum swings, right? At one time, it was great to be privileged and wealthy and elite. And the pendulum kind of swung where it was supposed to go in the direction of, let's kind of be a little bit more considerate of people who don't live under these circumstances. Instead, it went all the way in the opposite direction, as it does, right? Where it's now just the worst thing in the world to have any semblance of privilege, to be able to eat, to be able to afford rent, you know? So they are desperate to shirk any semblance of privilege that they have, because they have been taught that privilege is a bad thing. And the sad, painful reality of this is that people in Gaza, people in Iran, people in Syria, people in Sudan would give their lives for just a scintilla of the privilege that they have. And they are so ashamed of it. They are so ashamed of it.
Yeah, I really wonder what would happen if they walked off that campus and walked into Gaza.
No, anybody on the ground, if they lived one day on the ground in the Middle East, they absolutely wouldn't be doing the things that they're doing right now. Their tune would change dramatically. But as I told you, I think I told you on the show, I'm not sure that I did. You cannot break America from the outside. The only way to take America down is from the inside. And this is the long game that the Islamic Republic have been playing for a long time. And this is the exact manifestation of that long game in becoming successful. This is exactly what it looks like when America starts to crack from within, which is exactly what makes it vulnerable to foreign predators. And if people don't wake up now, I don't know what anybody needs to see, what else anybody needs to see to wake up.